Here we go. Here goes nothing. All right. Now, that what I just played is an excerpt from the Hungarian Rhapsody number 5, written by Franz Liszt. Let me put my horn away. I will bet, even money bet, you could go through the internet, through any show on television, and you're not going to find an interview show that starts with the interviewer playing either a classical piece, a jazz piece, a standard on a trumpet before the show starts. Where's the only place that you can find it? Well, I'll tell you where. You're at it. Life After Scientology. And I'm your proprietor, as Tony Ortega likes to say. I'm your proprietor, Ron Miscavige. Welcome to the episode. Now, this morning we have a very unusual guest. As a matter of fact, he's never been interviewed before. And it's a subject that I'm sure you're all going to find interesting. It's a story about somebody who went up the bridge all the way to Ot8 and what he discovered there. And he's going to tell about this during the entire show. But before we get into it, let me take care of some business because I have some acknowledgments to make of people who became patrons, and I'd like to acknowledge you. So here we go. First of all, we got Yvonne Woolman, $1. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Very much appreciated. Then Susan Anderson, $2. Thank you very much, Susan. Very much appreciated. Sherry Himmler, $2. And thank you very much, Sherry. Then this is a handle. This isn't the guy's name. Y'all ain't right for $2. Thank you very much, y'all. All right. And then we have Corey, and I may murder this last name, but hopefully I won't. Corey Cichani. Cisani. Listen, I apologize if I'm saying it wrong, but my take on it is that it's an Italian name. So I'm going to say Corey Cichani for $20. Thank you very much appreciated. And then David Strylick, also for $20. And David, thank you very much appreciated. And all of you who might be listening for the first time, you can become a patron by going to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, and you can find out how to join and support the show and support this endeavor. And if you do it, it's very much appreciated. If you don't do it, that's okay too. Just stay tuned and listen to these episodes. You're going to get enlightened on a very bad group that hopefully we can reform them or maybe get them to knock off some of the abuses they've done for the last, as long as I've been around, since 1950 when they started. So anyway, that takes care of business, and I welcome you as a patron, any of you who want to join. So now let's get into the program. And this is really fly by the seat of your pants productions because we have some pictures that we're going to be showing you. And this is unrehearsed. By the way, there is a picture of the gentleman who I'm going to be speaking to this morning. And without any more words, please welcome George White. Good morning, George.
Thank you very much, Ron. Good morning to you. And that is totally cool music. And I want to personally thank Brian Lambert for putting me in touch with you because it's really been a pleasure. And thank you very much, Brian.
I appreciate that. And for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Brian Lambert, I've had on the show, and I will have him on again in the future. He's a friend of George's, and he called me and he said, Ron, he says, you got to get George on. The guy is a wealth of information that's never been revealed before. So I'm looking forward to talking to you, George. And by the way, just a little business here. George wrote a book called Lucifer's Bridge. And if you go onto Amazon, and you can order it there. And if you can't, complain to Amazon, because I know I tried to get a copy and it was a little bit of a problem with downloading it. But that's the name of the book he wrote. So now let's get right into it. And first of all, to start off, George, as I do with anybody I have on the show, I'd like to find out how you got into Scientology. Why don't you go in that and just give us a little information on that?
All right. I was in Korea during the Vietnam War, and
Wait, George, before you go on, were you there in the armed services, or were you there as a civilian, or what?
I was in the United States Army. I was Hawk Missiles, and I was stationed on top of, you probably heard of it, Incheon, where MacArthur landed. I was on a small mountain right there for 15 months. So
Absolutely.
I was a fire control officer, and what I was doing was watching the North Korean MiGs come down every day on the radar and hoping they wouldn't come south, and they always turn.
Okay. Anyway, continue. Then you went to New
Okay.
York after you were in the
Yeah,
service?
and after I got out of the Army, I applied to Columbia University in New York City, the Graduate School of Business, and I got accepted. So I was headed to New York. My father had died when I was 18. My mother was sort of living up in Massachusetts, so I was on my own. First thing I did when I got to New York was tried to contact Mr. Donald Trump, who was one of my classmates in high school. And I had a brief meeting with him, and I tried to set up something in real estate with him, but I didn't know anything about real estate at the time, so we parted ways. That was in the early 70s, about 1972.
Wow.
And yeah, after that, I had to make a decision about what I was going to do. And actually, I was down on Fifth Avenue in New York, and I got stopped by this young lady, and she says, would you like to learn more about communications? And I said, sure. And they had a mission right on Fifth Avenue. So she routed me in to see this man, Mr. George Chalikas, who I talked to for a while. And he said, I can improve your communication. I've got this course. I said, what's it all about? He described it. I said, how much? He said, $15. So I said, well, I can scrape up $15. That's not a big deal. Let's do it. So they took me into this room with chairs set up, and there was about 8 or 10 people in there, and they were paired up. They were doing this communication course, and I met this course supervisor. They made me sign a few papers, I think. And then they brought this girl, Kathy, over, and they said, she's going to be your twin. I said, what's a twin? I said, well, she's going to go through he said, she's going to go through the drills with you. So let's get started. So I started the communications course.
Great.
Yeah. And I did it. And then they interviewed me, and I said, they doing a test. I said, hey, this is pretty good. I really enjoyed this. And the price was right, $15. I saw this big chart with a picture of L. Ron Hubbard at the top. And I said, what is that and who is he? So they said, well, you need to go through all the steps to get to the top. That's L. Ron Hubbard. I said, how old is he? I never heard of him. They said, well, he's in his 60s. Actually, they said he was in his 50s, but actually he was 61 at the time because I calculated the years. And I said, well, what's that at the top? And they said, that is the highest level you can achieve in Scientology. So I said, okay, let's talk about this. They signed me up for a few courses, which I did. And then the subject came up of life repair. And I said, well, how much does that cost? And that was quite a bit. That was a couple $1,000s. But in those days, now if you wanted to do it, it's probably much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I said, okay, they explained to me the pinch test, the auditing, and everything like that. I said, well, let's do it. I said, I just came back from Korea. I've been exposed to Agent Orange. I've got a few other issues. some minor PTSD, stuff like that. So I said, let's go do it. I raised the money up, which I had in savings, and I bought these intensives, and they did the life repair, and it was good. I said, I took a couple. I think it took about an intensive, but I went into the success stories. And I said, yeah, that was all right. I mean, it made me focus on these things. I don't know anything else. They sold me the book Dianetics, which I read, which I sort of liked, but I saw it as kind of weird. He started out with this Escalapian school of medicine, which I had to do some research on that. But I got through it. And then I said, well, how am I going to get to the top of this bridge, this so-called bridge? Well, they said you can start off with this super literacy course, which is where you look up 6,000 words in the dictionary. How much does it cost? I don't know, $50 or something. It was really inexpensive. And so I took that course and I spent months looking up all these words. And then they interviewed me after that. I said, yeah, it was really good. I looked up Escalapian. I said, so I got through that. I'm fine. And I decided at that particular point in time that I was going to go up to this high level, which they showed me OT 27, I think, but it was actually going to be OT8. And this I made as my goal. And it took me 17 years to get to this OT8 level. That's how I got into Scientology.
Wow. Do you have that cert there, Sean?
Yeah.
I'd like to show that cert on the screen. It's Ot8 Cert. There it is. Okay. So that's what you were shooting for in those
Yes.
early days, right?
And that took me 17 years and cost me a lot of money, but nowhere near what they're spending now.
Yeah.
I can honestly say that. And I would say that in the early parts of Scientology, there's a lot of practical things that you learn. Look up words, you learn a little bit about study, you learn new terms that you've never heard before. And you do this auditing at the beginning, which it's more, I personally don't believe in the engram theories anymore. But looking back over all these years, I think what it is, it's a summarization. I think abreaction is the closest term in Scientology, where I think that's what, it's not a Scientology term. Abreaction is a psychology term. But what it basically means is, do you review your past life? Not your past life. You review the things that have happened to you in the past and sort of get an emotional relief. And
Right.
it's just an abreaction is all. It's just a simple thing. And you're using the e-meter, or they're using the e-meter at first to make these reads, which is a story in itself as to how I found out that worked.
Right. And I'm going to say something, and I not have a tendency to agree with you. I simply agree with you that those early courses and drills and the training that you do in Scientology is somewhat helpful in life.
Yes.
And I've said this many, many times, I'll say it again. If Scientology threw away all the garbage, all the promises that they can't deliver, all the disconnection, all trying to ruin people's lives, and just concentrated on simple things like maybe a communication course, some simple communication in their auditing or counseling, it could be a nice self-help group. It's not going to happen, but I'm just saying that's how I feel about the beginning courses. But George, do you agree that that's the hook? That's where you get to believe that, okay, now you have this and it's worked, so then everything's going to work. I mean, that's what happened to me.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened to me. Is I was getting these kind of little wins or victories or whatever, and I said, well, I'm going to continue with this. That's the carrot.
Yeah.
That's what motivated me to go forward. I didn't really have any earth-shaking realizations. There wasn't anything great happening, but it was just comforting.
Yeah.
And I would add one more thing, Ron, and this is my belief, is I met so many talented people at the beginning that it was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I met a guy from, I mean, I went right in there in that course, and there's a guy from IBM. Okay.
Yeah.
I go to another org, I meet a guy who graduated from Yale,
Yep.
you know, et cetera. It just on and on and on, these talented people.
Oh yeah. Now let's go. Let's kind of stay on this your trip up the bridge, because then you did go clear, and
Yes,
when was that?
that was in 1976. And what they said to me was, what do I need to do? I said, what do I need to do? Well, you need to go to LA to go clear. How much does that cost? It was very reasonable.
Yeah.
So I had to do a few courses in the e-meter to get there. And I did those courses, and I was really good on the e-meter. And I found out why at the end, why I was so good on the e-meter. But I went to LA in 76 actually, and I did the original clearing course, which was very different from the way they do it today. Um, Hubbard described that as, this is so simple, it's like digging a ditch. You can't possibly mess this up.
Hmm.
All you have to do is take this meter and you go. They gave me a room. I had the room. I think I was at the Manor. I'm not sure if that was the place, which was the Celebrity Center, because they changed names. But I went in there, and you got this material, and it was I'll tell you, it reminded me of my my college English class, because I remember specifically I had this professor, and he would make us do these dichotomies where you would good, bad, beautiful, ugly, I mean, et cetera, and there's hundreds of them, because it was good for developing your writing skills. But Hubbard had just a list of these. There was maybe 100 of them, and you just had to go with the meter through these until you reach the state of clear, which they didn't really describe. But um, what I got out of it was, I was doing this list, and I got to the point where I felt a little bit of relief, and I had had some problems sleeping until my early 30s, um, and it helped with my insomnia. It didn't clear my insomnia, but I can honestly say that I think I was in my, I'm not sure how old I was then, but it helped with my insomnia.
I got it.
Yeah, and so I felt good, and I declared. I said I've reached the state of clear,
I got
and
it.
they agreed with me. They gave me an exam, and that was it. So um, I had to move. I went back to uh, New York, where I was still at the New York mission, and everybody congratulated me and all that. So I said, well, what do I do next? And they said, well, you've got to go back to do Ot8. You need more time. And how much does that cost? Well, that cost a little bit more, but it was still reasonable. I mean, they gave me a whole package, which included Ot8 plus the e-meter drills, plus preps, plus everything. And it was like $800. I mean, it was reasonable. And that's the other thing, is Scientology hadn't unbundled at that time. What I mean unbundled is the later bridge got so expensive because you had to pay for every little piece. It was like buying a car and having to pay for the steering wheel separate. I mean, it really got expensive. But um, I went out to LA to do Ot8, and now I'm getting into where I'm meeting a lot of these OT people who were really enthusiastic. Um, I went out there, I got the material, and I read it, which was the Xenu material, which is very, very famous. And I had done that um, uh, a little. I don't have the cert for that, but it was a couple of years after Clear, probably around the 78.
Right.
Okay, I was out there, and I remember reading the Xenu stuff, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's all well and good. He's a science fiction writer. Um, he's putting this out there. I don't know whether it's right or wrong. It reads on the meter. I know that because I said to myself, well, if it reads on the meter, I'm going to do this. And I go in there and I take his questions and it goes on the meter and I get this long read. I'm going, well, maybe it's out there. I don't really think it matters. I had, this is before I wrote to L. Ron Hubbard, but because I wrote him a letter after this asking him for advice, which you probably see on the screen right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that letter, I was so, I wanted whatever he was talking about in terms of OT powers and things, I wanted a piece of it.
Right.
But I wasn't getting it. What I was getting was kind of interesting information. I was getting a sense of relief. The Xenu stuff didn't bother me that much. I got the read, I ran it. Now, it's interesting what happened when I got out of OT3 and attested is these people, well, I'm saying these people was the staff around me. They were 100% expecting me to join the Sea Org at that point in time because I talked to, we had these lunches. We had lunch in the cafeteria there. I think it was, that was the Manor Hotel, the Celebrity Center before it was renovated. Yeah. Right. These fellas would talk to me and they were all FSMs, which field staff member. They get a 15% commission on anything that goes forward. And they're telling me, you're not in the Sea Org. I mean, most of the people that take this OT3, they're in the Sea Org. I'm not in the Sea Org. I'm nowhere going there. And they were trying to sell me on OT5. They were trying to give me, and it was, I'll tell you, once I hit OT3, there was this sense that the people around me were expecting me to do more, to give more, to do any kind of forward movement. And I was just saying, hey, I'm along for the ride. I want to get to see what this man has to say. This is what I'm on a journey. I want to go to the top. So I pretty much let that go. And I wrote to L. Ron Hubbard many times. And he wrote back and he said, well, if you want to be an OT, you've got to learn the PDC tapes and Technique 88. And I said,
wait, before you go on, just on the off chance that somebody doesn't know what you're talking about when you say PDC, that's called the Philadelphia Doctorate Course Lectures.
Yes.
And they were delivered in late 1952 and then just a little bit into 1953. And there was about 74 of them. And it was, as a matter of fact, I was on the street where they were delivered. That street no longer exists. But I happened to be there one night and I saw the house that it was delivered in. And I knew about 3 people who went to them. But that was considered to be the top information about life and living this in Scientology at the time. Anyway, continue, George.
Yeah, so I was moving along as an executive. I had been with a master's degree from Columbia Business School. I was doing very well. So this was not an issue to me. But what happened was my company was purchased by a company in Canada. So I had to move to Toronto. And it was kind of a touch and go thing. I was married at the time. My wife didn't want to go. There were some issues there with her, which, by the way, I want to tell a side story about it. This is funny because, to me, it's funny. When I met this woman in Scientology in the early 70s, she was into Scientology, but she was just learning. And we were talking about the bridge. I was doing the courses. She didn't mind that. And I said to her, well, how come you're not doing any more courses? And her response was, I cannot see how anyone as fat as L. Ron Hubbard could be a spiritual leader. And I said, well, I can see that he's fat. I said, but that doesn't matter. I mean, I think he has something to say. And she refused. She says, I'm leaving Scientology.
Because L. Ron Hubbard was fat.
What?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. It's a good thing she thought that because you got her the hell out of there, right?
She got the hell out of there. And we stayed married for about 4 years. And then but I'll tell you something, towards the end, she got off track a little bit. So her own advice. But it's good that she stayed out of it.
That's
It's
good.
good. I mean, that's what happened.
So
But
that
so
was
I
a good that was a good realization.
that was a good
You're
realization.
too fat to do data about life. I love it.
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
This, I tell you, this is the first time I've ever heard anybody have that, what they call realization or
Yeah,
cognition,
yeah.
about something in life. Well,
Because
I would believe you, but you're too goddamn fat. Well,
yeah, because she was a slim lady and she knew what it took to stay slim, and it was like, he's too fat. If he can't control his weight, what can he really teach me?
she had a
So
point. Don't knock it, man. She had a point.
she had a point. She had a point.
Okay. So look, before we go any further, look, now we're talking about you made it up to
Well,
OT3. What's your
yes.
take on this so far? Did you ever have any underlying feeling like, okay, I'm going to go
Yeah.
a little further, but what was your thought at the time?
Skeptical doubt all the way. Skeptical doubt all the way. I was really hanging on the side. I was constantly being bombarded to join the Sea Org. I was, constantly asked for money and stuff. I was hanging. I had a successful business career. I was hanging on the side.
Yeah.
They call, by matter of fact, when I got to Miami, which will come on later, that they absolutely want. They called me the dilettante.
Yeah.
George the dilettante. And what that means in Scientology is you're not really into it.
Yeah.
You're just along for the ride. You're not a staff member. But that was nowhere near the truth, because I had read everything that he ever wrote. So when I got to Canada, now, so what happened was I had to move to Canada. It was just a job thing. And that was a really good decision that I made, because I joined up in the Toronto org. And at that time, Scientology was under attack. They had just shut down the Toronto org. And the Canadians were just wild. There were people losing money and stuff like that. We were getting up now into the controversy. The old days of sleepy 70s with just paying a few dollars, the prices were just rising. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the last things before I left Chicago was the big price increase had been announced. And if people don't know about that, that was brutal.
Mm.
That was brutal. The prices went up a certain percent every month.
I think it went up 10% every month.
Yes, 10% every month.
Yep.
Brutal. And that forced people to dig deep, because the idea was, if you didn't buy now, it was going to be so much more expensive. I mean, they were selling Ot8. They were doing all kinds of weird things.
Yeah.
But I did get to Canada, and they had a little mission there, which was like a celebrity center. And I got to know the people there, and they were just really, really friendly. The fellow who ran the mission was a St. Hill Special Briefing Course graduate, which, for people that don't know, that's in England, where you really learn all kinds of things about Scientology. And his wife was just a celebrity beautician. Nice, I forget her name, but nice, nice lady. And I met all the people in there. And I took a few courses. They couldn't really give me much, because I had been doing all the auditing courses, but they did have this happiness rundown, which they could deliver to me.
Yeah.
So I did this which was just a sideshow. And that is where I started to really have doubts about Scientology, because that famous tape came out where they impersonated L. Ron Hubbard's voice. I think that was on there. And the Canadians were just in a total uproar.
I remember that. I remember
Yeah.
that. And that was supposed to be used to befriend somebody who was no longer your friend because they were against you being a Scientologist. Is that right?
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And by the way, just as an aside, and I think I'm going to bring it up. In Toronto, there's a street called Yonge Street, Yongc, Yonge. It's the longest street in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And I swear to God, the wind coming off the lake, if you took one of these things like a kite and had a pair of rollerblades on, and held a kite up, it would push you up that road for a good 10 miles. I bet it would do that.
Yes, I bet it would too.
Because
I remember that.
the wind is terrific coming off the
Yeah,
lake.
I
And
remember that.
that street goes on. I think it's 21 miles long.
I think you're right. I do remember that, Young
Yeah.
Street. And it was
Okay.
yeah. So we get to Toronto, and I've got a real good job. I've got a real good income. I mean, the Canadians just made this incredibly good offer. I'm in this beautiful condo. I've got all kinds of funds, but I'm getting kind of antsy up there because it's so cold. So what I do is I start listening to the Philadelphia Doctorate Course tapes in this condo in the winters.
Yeah.
And I just go over these over and over and over again because L. Ron Hubbard said that if I had to know these. And I went over them countless times, some of the tapes as many as 60 times.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. So I had it memorized, and I was probably one of the most knowledgeable people. I listened to everything that L. Ron Hubbard published. And I even, and I'll just do this as an aside, but I was such a space cadet and so dedicated. I went into Flag one day and told them that I wanted to purchase certain tapes that L. Ron Hubbard did on the reel to reel
Yeah.
because I was doing research. And they were in such dire straits when I walked in there. They said for $50 each, I could take whatever tape I wanted out of their massive library as long as there was a duplicate. And I went through there and found all these obscure tapes, which I still have.
Wow.
There was one called Death, in which L. Ron Hubbard talks about his ideas of death. And I remember playing that for my wife. We had a real laugh out of it. And I don't there was another one called The Anatomy of Sleep. There was all kinds of OT things that you never ever hear about, you know. But by the way, is as an aside, L. Ron Hubbard believed that sex was death. That is what is on that tape. That has never been released by the church because it's who would want to debate that. But if you research it, orgasm was death. But
Wow.
oh yeah, that's his belief.
Boy, there's a lot of people who should be dead by now.
There's a lot of people who should be dead.
All
Well,
right.
I played that, but anyway, that's an aside. So I got to Canada, and I had money, so I used to fly down to Flag in Clearwater
Right.
and I started OT 4, 5, 4 and 5. Yeah. And going down there on weekends, I completed OT 4, which was real simple because I had shaken my alcoholism from my Korean days, because I came back from Korea in pretty bad shape on the drinking level. But Scientology was not responsible for me shaking the drinking. That was Alcoholics Anonymous, which I used for a while, and I never had a drink after that. 50 years, I think. But so that was not a problem. But I would go down there to Flag, and this is where the big Mayo controversy started coming in, where I had to do OT5 3 times. As a matter of fact, parts of it I did 5 times. And this is where I started to get, this is where I started to get really skeptical. That's me in the center in the gray. But this is where I started to get really skeptical about Scientology, because they were making me do everything over and over again. And I was saying to myself, well, when am I going to get these abilities? When am I going to get something spiritual? When am I going to get some kick in the pants, or whatever you want to call it? When are they going to kick me, or when is he going to say those magic words? And it was not happening. All they were doing was going over and over. And it was like, kind of reminded me of the Catholic Church trying to figure out how many angels could fit on the head of a pin, which
I
was,
remember.
that was one of the greatest debates of the Middle Ages. And I said, this is what they're doing. This is what he's doing. He's gotten to the point of minutia. And
Yeah.
later on, when I lost my IQ, because I'll trace this. I significantly believe that after Ot8, my IQ dropped at least 10, 15 points. And I think that was one of the reasons, is because there was this constant minutia that he was getting involved in, where they were trying to define something in such specific terms that it became meaningless.
Yeah. Now, George, before you go on, let me just interrupt. That picture that you're looking at on the screen is on the Freewinds ship, and
Yes.
those people are doing what's called a lifeboat drill. By law, you have to do this with passengers on a cruise liner because there's rules, and I think is it the safety at sea that makes you do this? There's some
Yes.
organization.
They come out with some in charge. That guy to the extreme right is the guy who did it, and he was the in charge.
Right. And that's what they're doing. Now that was when you went there to do Ot8, is that right?
Correct. And that was in 1988.
Right.
This is a few. I had to go through OT7, but yeah, this is on the free winds, and this is. I'll tell you when this happened. The maiden voyage was May 1st. There were approximately 200 on the maiden voyage, and my FSMs came back, and I had such doubt about Scientology. I didn't go on the maiden voyage. I'm going to wait and see. But when they came back and sold it to me, which they were my FSM, so they got 15%. This is when the big bucks started. Up to this time, I had spent very little. Yeah, and this is on that voyage, and we are doing the course, and I'm not sure whether I had read the Antichrist document. I don't think I did, because
Okay, but now wait,
yeah,
let's date this because the maiden voyage was in June of 1988.
this was in July.
So you were on the second voyage?
Yeah, the second voyage, which is July 15th.
Okay.
In 1988. Yes.
Right.
So by this time, the original 200 Ot8s had come back, and the pipeline was drying up because there were only 37 on the second voyage. And this leads to a major crisis because I think they spent 12 million for the free winds. And the idea and the pressure on us was unbelievable. The idea was they'd get 200 on a maiden voyage, then they'd get another 200, another 200, another
Yeah.
200, and the ship would be successful. It was a total disaster. Only
Right.
37 showed up.
Okay. Now I have in my notes here about the Trubbish implant. You want to go
Yes,
into that now? Because
sure.
that's an interesting story.
Yes, let's
And,
get into it.
yeah, please. That would be good.
Okay.
Well,
So
wait a minute. Why did you bring this up? We did this prior to the show. Obviously, I talked to the people I'm going to interview before the show comes on, and he brought up the Trubbish implant, and this
yes,
is what a friend of his did, who's an artist, and it's done exactly precisely to what L. Ron Hubbard said. Now, that having said that, why don't you just explain this and how you
okay,
came about to tell me about it?
okay. Before Ot8, I received numerous briefings. And what they said was study everything about L. Ron Hubbard because you are about to get to truth revealed. Now, I had done the PDC tapes and all of his tapes numerous times. The most important implant, because I knew I was going to handle implants on Ot8. That was not a secret. Everybody knew that. The most significant implant that L. Ron Hubbard talks about, and early on, this is way early on the track, are the heliotrope implants. The purpose of the heliotrope implants were to implant into humans and beings the idea of heaven and hell, and to a certain extent, Jesus, angels, saints, spirits, and all. In other words, this is the master implant that leads to amnesia on the whole track. Because what is happening here is you're getting a moral conscience, you're getting heaven and hell, and you're getting these ideas of God, you're getting these ideas of Jesus and a savior. Now, the way that Hubbard says it happened is that there was a wandering group of space aliens, which he says he knew very little about, but they used to go around in flying saucers, which if you look to the top of the picture, you'll see the Red Cross symbol. And Hubbard specifically says that these spaceships had a Red Cross symbol, and they would go to a town, a village, or they used to prefer to go to open fields where they would find people, and they would blast on their loudspeaker the word heart, which you see there. And they would send implant beams, which are, you see, they're yellow,
Yeah.
hitting people. And what they were doing was instantly implanting them with this Heliotrobus implant. Now, what would happen then is, to a certain extent, not all of the people, you see the little egg to the left with the little man in there?
Mm-hmm.
They would pull them up into the ship for further implanting. And you see there's about 3 of them. And the most important part of the implant, which is hard to show, but you see on the left a positive, and you see on the left or on the right a negative. Okay. They were also implanting the idea of a positive and a negative. They would sweep a positive and negative beam over these people as they were being implanted. Now, some of them that went into the ship were then returned, but there were fleets of these going here, and basically, this is Hubbard's view of why Christianity, Jesus, is trash. And it's going to lead into the truth revealed doctrine, his truth revealed doctrine on Ot8, that he was acting in the role of Lucifer when he created Scientology. And I want to qualify that because he does say that it's all in the end mythological. But the Heliotrobus implants are not mythological. They're electronic implants that he believes that did happen. He acted in the role of Lucifer, but he never ever says that he was Lucifer. But in the end, he is Lucifer, as I'll explain, because when you get to the end of Ot8, that's it. So the Heliotrobus imp, by the time I got onto the free winds, this was one of the things that I was going to audit for Truth Revealed, because it had been revealed to me in his early lectures.
I got it. Well, you got to say one thing. He's creative, man.
Yes.
If
I mean,
anything.
but I'm going to tell you something, Ron, because I've spent a lot of time studying L. Ron Hubbard. And when I get to the end of this, you're going to see that 90% of it comes out of Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky.
Right.
And a guy named Rudolf Steiner, and a guy named Charles Ledbetter, and a few like Freud. We all know that. But this was my original thought, was that he was creative. And I've got this all documented because I spent a lot of time with Professor Hugh Urban at Ohio State University, and also with Catherine Wessinger from Loyola, New Orleans. And they directed me to sources that are just unbelievable about where L. Ron Hubbard was really getting his data, and how his mind really was formed by Blavatsky. You take, for example, we would think, I used to think, well, where did he get this thing about Markabs? Where did he get this thing about the 5th Invader Force and the 4th Invader Force, which, for people who don't know, these are space alien. If you know Star Trek, they're like the Klingons, right?
Yeah.
They're running around there. But it all comes from Blavatsky. It does.
And by the way, for the listeners, I'll tell you something. I ran across some stuff by Blavatsky, and you talk a person is long-winded.
Yes,
If you can say something in a sentence, she'll take 22 pages to say the same thing. You
exactly.
agree?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I had an assignment from these religious scholars. I read in total. I read um, ISIS Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine, which are 5,000 pages in total.
Jesus.
Yeah, and yeah. I actually it took me 6 months to get through her. And then I'll tell you something. The other thing that really blew me away. You read the press at the time of Blavatsky, it's exactly what they're saying about Scientology. It's a fraud. It was. And, she actually went further down the road. And there's an interesting story about Alcott, because Alcott was he was a colonel in the Civil War, and he was her buddy. He never had any kind of sexual contact with her, but he lived with her. And he said he was the most comprehensive person that ever observed her. And he said that everything that she was talking about was unverifiable, except one thing. There was one thing which he stood by. He said, for some unknown reason, she could create a knocking sound, whether she was a ventriloquist or whatever. But
Wow.
that was the end of Blavatsky. But
Wow. Well, that's interesting. The thing is, L. Ron Hubbard was very creative in coming up with these things. And I can see now, because he also got some of his information from the New Thought movement, which was the late 1800s,
yes,
early 1900s.
absolutely. And I had to study that too for my assignments with the religious scholars. Absolutely. There was Annie Besant and a few others. They wrote those books on the New Age. But, the thing about Hubbard is the New Age was going in a positive direction. It was the age of Aquarius and stuff like that. Hubbard
Oh,
was
no,
going
no,
the
no, no.
wrong way.
I'm not talking about the New Age. I'm talking about New Thought. That's
Oh,
late
yes.
1800s, early 1900s.
Yes, you're right. New Thought. Absolutely right. The New Thought. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I do remember that.
Okay, so now let's talk about Hubbard saying he's the Antichrist. Let's
Oh,
get
yeah.
into it, because this is you're on Ot8 now. What's your take on that? How did that go?
It didn't bother me in the least, and I'll tell you why. Because I went to Holy Cross College, which is a Catholic university. I took numerous courses in theology. I took numerous courses in the Bible, and the Antichrist, we covered it in depth. And the other thing is, he said it was mythological. So it didn't hit me that hard. And I had the idea, but I'm going to tell you, it hit a lot of other people hard, because there was so much mental damage on the free winds that they had to set up a special unit. I remember a Mexican gentleman who was a very nice man who was on Ot8. He came up to me after reading that bulletin, and he was destroyed. He didn't know what to do. I mean, he came to me for advice, and I said, well, the best that I can tell you is to just go to, what do they call that? The repair guy you go to for auditing
Well,
the
it's in the qualifications division. That's
yeah, go to the qualifications division. He said, I'm only going to tell you that I understand. And then there was an Israeli girl who cornered me on the side of the ship. She was ready to commit suicide.
wow.
Yes, yes. And she just kept going over how this this pressure on her head, and I just did the best I could with her. I gave her some, some like affection, and I said to her, no, don't do that. Just you got to go to the qual. I mean, all I could do was send these people to the qual division.
Yeah.
I mean, and then there was another woman who was, I'm not kidding you. She was, she thought after Ot8 that she was a kamikaze pilot. And she would run the ship with her arms extended, making like a kamikaze plane, and bang into the side of the ship. I
Jesus
mean,
Christ.
yeah, this was unbelievable, because Hubbard was saying basically that the entire future of planet Earth was controlled by alien telepathy, which you saw the slide for that.
Yeah.
It's not spaceships. He says that he says in Ot8 really that you're going to get these spaceships, but it's going to be a war. But the real control is an Illuminati in outer space who are not too smart. And what they are doing, and this is where it ties into Xenu, where the entire story of Xenu is incomplete. Because Xenu on Ot8 is when these Illuminati space aliens controlling by telepathy took control of planet Earth's DNA. And this DNA control is what is leading to the downward spiral on planet Earth, making it fall apart, where you have now this year the most suicides ever. Now, personally, I don't believe that it's these dumb beings in outer space that are controlling the DNA. I believe that there are controllable factors that are actually doing it. But so this the solution. Hubbard never ever wanted to audit the genetic entity, which for people who don't know, that is basically a little being that lives in your stomach. All right, he controls your body, and the reason Hubbard said that he never had to audit it was in his writings was because it was irrelevant, because it was the Thetan that you were after.
Yeah.
He
Hold on, because I
Okay.
got to just clarify this a little more. Not that
Sure.
you're not clarifying it, okay, but look, the genetic entity was the thing that will run your heart, your digestion, the growth of your body, all of those physical aspects. And then you have in Scientology the actual life force, the spirit that is like the engineer running a train. But the train itself is the fire going or making the steam, making the wheels go around would be like the genetic entity. I don't
Correct.
know if I made it more complex than you. But I apologize for that if I did. But the genetic entity was considered to be not worth handling
Yes,
in Scientology.
correct. And Hubbard reverses himself on Ot8. And he says that you must handle this genetic entity, which I was prepared to do because I had read all of his previous documents. But now, see, here's Xenu. And here's the misconception about Xenu. See, Xenu has gotten this gig. They make him like a Flash Gordon, or they make him like a Klingon with Hollywood and stuff like that. But if you go to Revolt in the Stars, Xenu walked with a limp, carried a sharp stick, which you see out of his hand, and had a cane. And he was wore a business suit. That's very clear in Revolt to the Stars.
Well,
So I
wait,
had
no,
this.
we have to explain Revolt in the Stars. That was a script written by L. Ron Hubbard that was supposed to be made into a movie, and he considered if it were made into a movie, it would clear up people's minds of all the bad things that Xenu did earlier on. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct. And it was written right after Star Wars, and he was trying to cash in on the millions.
Right.
Okay. But Xenu here, and here's where it fits into Ot8. Xenu had a 3-point plan. First, they would kill the loyal officers, which you see the green gun hitting the blue. Now, the loyal officers were the ones that were the straights. That was L. Ron Hubbard, supposedly, and that was his boys. They were loyal officers. That's the Sea Org, actually.
Right.
And then they were blown up in volcanoes. And while they were being blown up in volcanoes, there was a thing called a soul catcher, which is a ribbon, which was an electronic ribbon, which was catching the Thetans. You see the soul catcher, and you see Xenu pointing. Now, in the background, there's the 76 planets in the Confederation. The reason that Xenu gave for his attack was that people were stealing income tax and galactic credits, which was controlled by a corrupt alcoholic minister of justice and the doctors. He didn't say psychiatrists because I don't think the word had been invented at the time, but that's what's in the background. Now, at precisely the moment of the nuclear explosion, these beings in outer space who were not too dumb, by telepathy, were altering the DNA of all these people and pre-programming it to lead to ultimate destruction.
And
So,
this is part of Ot8, right?
yes, this is Ot8. Ot8 extended the Xenu story to include these mysterious beings in outer space. Yes, and so what Hubbard was giving in that document, which, by the way, the church trashed it. Of course they did, because they don't understand it. I mean, I'm telling you what he's saying. I don't believe it, but I'm telling you what he is saying because I've put some of the pieces together, because I was one of the very, very few who took that course and came forward. I don't think anybody else has.
Okay, George, I hate to do this, but we're running out of time.
Oh, that's a shame.
No, listen, because there is a lot more I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover the actual level of Ot8 itself, what you did when you got on it. So,
Sean, I can give you all the processes, everything.
Okay, but wait a minute. I don't want to short shrift this. I don't want this to be like a 2-minute version, because this is too important. So, of course, I'm asking you, and I know you're going to say, okay, I'd love to have you come back and do another show to follow up so we can finish this off.
Sure, no problem. I'll do that. No problem. I mean, this is my quest. I mean, people need to know this.
I know, and I'll tell you something. As far as what it was like to go on to Ot8 and what you did and what you found out and what the end phenomena of it was, and how you took it at the time and how other people took it. Look, this is interesting stuff. I'm sure people want to know about it. Sean, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I thought that was really good. I just wanted you have one super chat from Karen Cookson that says happy Sunday for $20. So thank you, Karen.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. I appreciate that.
And Jesse Prince is in the chat.
Jesse?
Yeah.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
Hello, buddy. Does you want to say something, or?
No. He's just talking with the chat and stuff.
Okay, because Jesse is never short on words. I can tell you. He's a dear friend of mine. So thanks for listening in, Jesse. I appreciate that.
That's it.
Well, okay. So just wind up with a little business. If you'd like to contribute to this and be part of the team that's doing something about all these things, you can become a patron by joining up Patreon. That's my commercial. And even if you don't, I'm still gonna keep on doing this with my producer. But as I said many, many times, I'll say it again, you can turn from being just an audience or listening to it for enjoyment or enlightenment to a actual participant just by becoming a patron.
Yeah.
And the other thing is this: if you could please get other people to subscribe so we increase our listenership or our viewership, whatever word you want to use there, that would be very much appreciated. I'd like this to be at least 10 times bigger, and we get to that maybe 100 times bigger. And let's make something of this that's going to create a big effect. So many more people enlightened, so many more people educated as to a certain way of life so you don't get trapped into things like this yourself. Yeah. And George, I look forward to having you on again. And right now, I would like to tell our audience, let's make it next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Would you be available?
Yeah, I'll be available.
Same time.
That's fabulous. And we can get into this and tell the entire rest of the story, which is going to be the actual culmination of everything you've told me so far. And people will enjoy this.
Oh, Dan Coon's in the chat too.
Oh, good. Hey, Dan. Yeah. Great, man. So. Anyway, that's it for now. And this is Life After Scientology. I'm Ron Miscavige, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.